Our final speaker in this panel is Karen Salazar. Karen was a teacher. I think she's going to talk about her experiences as a teacher at it was Jordan High School, right? Jordan High School in South Central Los Angeles. Okay, Watts, I'm sorry. She had to correct me on that one. But I think she's going to share with us her experience in teaching ethnic studies and in the challenges of teaching ethnic studies in various contexts. Karen was also a product of our teacher education program here at UCLA. Got her master's degree here and her teaching credential. So I want to welcome Karen Salazar.
Good afternoon. I know that it's been probably a long day for a lot of y'all, so I'll try to keep this short. I want to start the way that I start all of my classes, similar to my comrade over here. Every year I start with my classes with the quote by South African freedom fighter Steve Biko: "The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." In other words, the way that, a predecessor to him, Carter G. Woodson had said, was the way that when you control a person's thinking, you don't have to control the way that they act, because you've already controlled the thoughts that precede those actions, right? And so, to me, this is the only way to talk about ethnic studies, because it's the only way to talk about education and schooling. And I actually want to begin with talking about what we're talking about when we say ethnic studies. The reality is that ethnic studies isn't what's under attack. Ethnic studies is taught every single day. The problem is how we define ethnic studies. We don't think about European and whiteness as ethnic. We only think about people of color's ethnicities as being ethnic people. And the minute that we stop counting Europeans and white people as not ethnicities, we start to normalize them, and we say that they're the ones who are normal, we're the ones who are different, we're other. And when we say that we're the ones who are other, it's all right for us to be treated other. In other words, it's all right for us to be oppressed. It's all right for us to be subjugated. So we need to start changing some of the language that we use. It's not ethnic studies. It's called our studies. There's a little bit different, right? And so it's important for us to recognize this, because this is a long process of what schooling has been like for our people in this country since this country was stolen from its rightful owners, right? This schooling has historically been a process of colonization for people of color in this country. Since this land was stolen, since we were colonized, they set up these schools that they called boarding schools, right? And they would literally kidnap people from their communities. And we're talking about indigenous peoples, right? Because African peoples weren't allowed to go to school, right? They weren't allowed to be taught any type of literacy skills, because literacy was power. So they would kidnap indigenous peoples from their communities, literally by gunpoint, knife point, whatever they had to do, kidnap them. They would take them to these schools far away from their communities, right? So they would be separated from their families, separated from their peoples, separated from anybody who could remind them of who they really were. Keep them away for months, years at a time. Once they were there, they made physical changes, obviously, right? They did things like, cut folks' hair off, even things that we don't think about, like lightening skin, right? And even today, we still see at the store and on, TV commercials, especially like the late night ads, skin lightening creams, that kind of thing, right? Sammy Sosa, made a little spectacle of himself, not too long ago. Because, right, this is still the process of colonialism that we've internalized because of the history of what schooling has done to our people, and it hasn't ended. And this is just a long history of what we've continued to go through. So this is nothing new. This attack on, ethnic studies is nothing new. This is just a continuation of what we've always faced. And it's always been an attack on our humanity of who we really are. And what this really is so that we don't fight back. And that's actually something that I learned from my students when I was at Jordan High School, is the way that a student broke it down for me was like, yo, when we learn about who we are, we start to love ourselves. Because when we hate ourselves, it's because we don't know who we really are. We think, we start to believe, who they want us to be. We start to become, who they want us to become under this colonial construct, right? And that's why we do the things that are, destructive to ourselves, to our, the people that we love, to our own communities. That's why we fight amongst each other, people who look just like us, right? People that we should be calling sister and brother, but not the real person, not the real people who are benefiting off of our suffering. Because best believe there's people who make profits. We're talking about big money off of our suffering on the daily, right? This is a business, right? People want us to be suffering. They want us to be dying, if not physically, then spiritually, intellectually, mentally, emotionally, culturally, all of that on the daily, right? And so the student broke it down for me and was like, you know, when we know who we really are, we start to love ourselves and we defend ourselves against these attacks that come down on our humanity. And that's really what they're afraid of. Because the minute that we defend ourselves, that's when we start fighting for our liberation. That's when we start fighting for our self-determination. And that's when we take back what's ours. And that's what they're really afraid of. So these attacks, you know, on so-called, you know, ethnic studies or whatever, that's not really what it's about. It's not the curriculum that they're afraid of. What they're afraid of is what the young people do with the self-love and the self-knowledge that they gain out of that curriculum. And so that has nothing to do with Arizona. That is here in LA. That's anywhere that colonized peoples exist, right? And we're survivors of that because we're still here. And everyone who's here, right, obviously, you're trying to learn something about it. You're trying to do something about it, right? This is one form of resistance, is that community knowledge, right? And so that's what they're afraid of. So I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if there's, you know, we always know that there's always people, you know, kind of come into our community spaces and, you know, trying to figure out, you know, like what's going on, you know, who are, you know, these instigators, you know, whatever. I wouldn't be surprised, no, not for real. I mean, some of you are laughing, but, you know, like I take that seriously because, you know, they take this seriously. Right? They take, obviously, the program in Tucson so seriously that they had to write a law to shut it down. That's how serious it is because of the power that it has, right, on young people to begin to organize and do something, you know, for their people and fight for their self-determination. And so basically what I just want to leave off with is, if y'all don't know, tomorrow, December 4th, marks 41 years of the murder of Chair Fred Hampton of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. He was murdered as he lay asleep in bed next to his wife, who was 8 months pregnant. He was murdered by, I actually just got caught out by some, I'm just saying, by some white folks yesterday because I say police instead of police. But, you know, he was murdered by some police and FBI while, you know, while they lay asleep, you know, in bed, and his wife was 8 months pregnant. And so some of the words that he was well known for, and I think that have profound meaning today, are that you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. And for me, that's like, you can try to kill these classes, you can outlaw these classes, but you can't kill the revolutionary spirit in the young people. You know, that seed has already been planted. And everyone here today is testament to that. And so, you know, the question is, what are you going to do after today? You know, after you hear these presentations, you know, a lot of you probably are here because you already support ethnic studies. So the question is not just what are you going to do to support ethnic studies, what are you going to do to fight for the liberation of your people? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Well, what we tried to do with this first panel is sort of give you a sense of the state of ethnic studies from the perspective of students, teachers, at different levels of the educational pipeline. And we're setting it up after this break to have Agustin Romero talk about what's happening in Arizona. And so what we'd like to do now, if you can do it something, if you can join me in thanking this panel, this first panel. And then we're going to take a short break, we're going to come back, and then Agustin's going to talk about what's happening in Arizona. So I think we're going to take 20 minutes. I think we have some music here on the right-hand side, your left, that's going to entertain us for the next 20 minutes. But please don't go away. Come back in about 20 minutes, and Augie is going to talk about what's happening in Arizona. Thank you very much.